What is going on, beautiful people? It is Obscurist Tourist here today in the Niagara escarpment. Boy, do I spend a lot of time here. There's a lot of beautiful things to see, and nothing is more beautiful than Balls Falls, the ghost town and surrounding area of Balls Falls here in Jordan, Ontario. So let's take a look. And this is the first stop today, the ruins of the Woolen Mill, which is about a 15-minute walk from the entrance of Balls Falls and about a 5-minute walk from the upper falls here in the park. As you can see, there is not much left of this 5-story mill, which is located on a 60-foot high bluff on the west bank of the 20-mile creek down below. Construction on this particular mill began back in 1824 by George Ball and was thought to have housed 8 looms that helped produce woolen and cloth yarns for local and export markets. The Woolen Mill was extensively renovated in the 1840s in order to expand its production so that it could manufacture cloth using both water and steam power. In 1894, this place was reopened and renamed the Anglican Woolen Mill, and by 1851, the mill employed some 30 workers. Several houses were built nearby for the workers and everyone employed here, and just at the base of the mill, downstream and through the trees, you can see just how close the upper falls are. An absolutely integral, natural wonder for the operation of any mill at the time. No small feat back in the 1800s, and you got a little Canadiana here, little maple. And we are standing atop, or is the actual term, the mouth of the upper falls of Balls Falls. This is the first of 2 falls here on 20 Mile Creek, and as I said, this would have powered the Woolen Mill. And you may notice that is not much of a waterfall anymore, which ultimately spelled the demise of the Woolen Mill as the creek's water levels receded over the years. I was specifically warned by the guide at the entrance to this place that the falls have been quite dry over the past few months, which leads me to believe that in the spring the water levels rise again, but I can't imagine that it's equal to what it must have been like 100 years ago. And just on this embankment here, about a mile away from the Anglican Woolen Mill, is quite a curious sight. I mean, you have all these massive boulders and rocks here, all covered in moss. Though natural, there is something quite unnatural about their placement, and it's very possible that this was where rocks were quarried from for the building of the mill and even some of the accommodations for the mill workers. And right here is the original home built by George Ball and his family way back in the early 19th century. It has been obviously restored and kept in wonderful condition, so it's nice to see that, at the end of the day, it's still standing. Just look at this place. Basically the American dream in Canada. White picket fence with all the trimmings. Fantastic property. And this is the ghost town, originally known as Balls Mills, Louth Mills, and ultimately Glenalgan, The town was actually established by Jacob Ball, a United Empire loyalist in the early 19th century. And it is a pretty amazing ghost town to boot. As I just showed you, it has the original Ball family home, operating grist mill, a lime kiln, a restored church, a blacksmith shop, and even a carriage shed. Two of Jacob's sons, John and, of course, George, received 1,200 acres of land here in 1807 and almost immediately set out to build a grist and a sawmill. It's interesting to note that a few years later, during the War of 1812, the settlement and immediate surrounding area was heavily utilized by the military as part of a regiment that was stationed here for a time. It was when the war ended that the town really began to flourish, and aside from a blacksmith, this place had its own tailor, weaver, and even a butcher. By 1852, the population of the town, now known as Glen Elgin, grew to 19 inhabitants. It was in the late 1850s, however, that Glen Elgin began its decline after the Great Western Railway was established. This is the St. George Anglican Church, and truth be told, it wasn't originally part of Glen Elgin. In fact, it was built in the 1860s in the small town of Hannon, Ontario. But it was ultimately dismantled, relocated, and rebuilt on this very spot in 1974. I'm not exactly sure why it was moved here, but here it is in all of its glory. This cabin represents what early settlers like the Ball family lived in when they first came to Ontario. This particular cabin was built by the Fairchild family between 1797 and 1810. Now, the construction here is pretty interesting, and its solid and interwoven wooden walls is how many homesteads would come to be built, even now. Now, like the previous cabin I showed you, this one sits just on the edge of Glen Elgin, and though I couldn't find any information about it, it looks to be from the same period as the Fairchild cabin. And just over here to the side, I don't know if you can see that through the foliage and the forest, that is one of the original kilns here in the town. Let's go up there and take a peek for ourselves. And there she is, still standing. Let's see if we can take a peek inside. A lot of the surrounding brick and rock looks to be original from the 1800s, but this particular entrance looks to have been rebricked. I don't even know if that's a term. Rebricked? Whatever. Let's take a peek and see what we can find inside here. Duck down. And there she is. It's like I'm in the bottom of a well. It's like that scene from Silence of the Lambs. Put the lotion in the basket. Yeah, I'm good. All of this area during autumn is just ridiculously beautiful. Highly recommended taking a little stroll or even a hike in one of the many parks here along the Niagara escarpment. This is Glen Elgin's, or Balls Falls' original blacksmith shop. And it was built sometime around the 1850s. And this right here is the carriage shed, which would have obviously housed all of the horse carriages for the townsfolk at the time. You can see some of the carriages still inside, though I can't really vouch for their authenticity as being some of the original equipment from the time of Elgin Mills. I mean, it does look to be from the time period, so it is really, really cool either way. Just imagine riding through the pathways on one of these carriages 150 years ago. How amazing would that have been? And this is the grist mill here that the Ball family had built in 1809. And it was basically the bread and butter, literally the bread of what the family was trying to achieve here, and all monetary gains. And pretty neat, but just out here on the front lawn of the mill are two of the original millstones that would have been integral to creating all the products that this mill churned out. This mill provided flour for the British Army who were stationed here during the War of 1812. An integral cog, and something that is seldomly given credit for not just the War of 1812, but many wars efforts. The provision of rations. Let's take a look-see and see if we can see inside the storage that is underneath the old mill. Not a lot to see, just some old storage. And right beside the mill, to the left of it, is the lower falls. And I was here a little while back, and there was nothing flowing over them, so we'll see if anything has changed. And it doesn't look like anything has. Right there you can see a pool of water down below, and just a smidge of what this falls could be back in its days of heavy flow. The Ball sawmill would have been located right around here, and unfortunately it closed in the very early 1900s and was allowed to go into disrepair, and eventually, well, as you can see, she's gone. I hope you enjoyed my little visit to Balls Falls here in Jordan, Ontario, and quite some sights today here in the autumn crisp air. For now, it is the Obscurist Tourist saying so long, stay safe, stay warm, but most of all, you know what? Stay beautiful. See you later.